Edwards, Finance Director from Autohorn Fleet Services, to our podcast Beyond the Boardroom. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Kerry. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for finding the time to join me today in your busy schedule. For our listeners that don't know Autohorn, could you talk a little bit about Autohorn Fleet Services?
Yes, of course. So I'm a relative newbie to the business, which was founded in 1995, actually. So it's our 30-year birthday next year, which is very exciting and quite impressive, I think, in this day and age, for a family-run business. So it started off down at the railway station with 3 cars on rent to let out to customers, and we've grown from there. So we've got 2 arms to our business now. We do monthly rental, so you can come get a car, have it for as long as you need it, based on kind of 28-day periods, or you can hire a car for the weekend and go somewhere and then return it back to us. So yeah, 2 quite different arms, different approaches, but it's exciting times for us at the minute.
Brilliant, and obviously really flexible, which most people need even more so at the moment, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been one of our key strengths over the last, I'll say 4 years now. It kind of feels like COVID's forgotten it a little bit, but we had our record years during COVID because of that flexibility, and it was just what people needed, not being kind of signed up for 3 or 5 years to a commitment that they might not be able to keep.
Absolutely. Can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to become a director at Autohorn?
Yeah, so I suppose for finance director, I've probably had a fairly standard approach. So I trained in audit, went to uni in Nottingham, did a business degree, trained in audit with Grant Thornton, fairly swiftly realised that the partnership route wasn't going to be for me. I think I've always wanted to get to know the businesses really, really well, and I think when you work in practice you don't always get that opportunity because you've got so many different clients, you're spread quite thin. So I left there when I'd qualified and got to a certain level where I felt like I'd be useful in industry and got that kind of level of knowledge, and actually went over to Taylor Wimpey, where I was head of group reporting, so still dealing with the audit, so I wasn't completely shifting away from that aspect, and using kind of the technical knowledge that I'd learned there, and I did that for 5 years, and then actually had the opportunity to cover 2 regional finance director roles. So Taylor Wimpey, for people that don't know, obviously massive house builder in this country. When I was there, it had 24 regional offices, each with their own miniature board. So there was a commercial director, a finance director, a managing director, all those kind of roles were there. And so I went to 2 of those offices and covered 1 for maternity and 1 for illness. And I think that's really when it cemented to me that I wanted to be in that smaller business rather than the big corporate structure, and really getting kind of hands dirty and actually having an influence on the direction of that business. So that was almost like a safety trial for being a director of a company where you were at the top of the chain, because obviously within that there was still the group ahead above you, so you weren't completely kind of on your own in terms of making those decisions. And then I left there, went on maternity leave actually, just before COVID hit. So Easter 2020 I was on maternity leave, and my husband is a chef and we had a pub, and as soon as COVID hit we thought, oh God, let's get rid of it. So we handed in our notice there and thought, we've always wanted to move to Yorkshire, now's the time because we're free. I'm on maternity leave, the pub's gone, let's do it. And so really just completely by chance, put out on my kind of LinkedIn and social media pages that I was looking for a role in Yorkshire, and was found by the company that Autohorn had engaged with to find their new finance director. So I was travelling up and down, hadn't actually moved to Yorkshire when I got offered the position, moved up in September 2020 and started in November 2020. So was originally employed, they did it I suppose a bit differently, because they actually employed me originally as head of finance, and it was with the view to progressing to finance director within 18 to 24 months. But I mean, you know the company, Kerry, and I think the support that they offered in that, you know, I was given an executive coach, you know, regular catch-ups with Lee, our MD, etc. Everything was geared towards making that successful. But it was just that they wanted not to just pick somebody up and plop them straight into that boardroom, but actually feel like they wanted to get somebody that they knew would be the right fit before kind of cementing that position. So,
that's fantastic. What journey. And I always love hearing from the finance directors that I speak to about moves from practice, because ultimately everybody, when they start in practice, they are looking for the opportunity, aren't they? And they're looking for the way out. So that's a really inspiring story. Thanks for sharing that. How has Autohorn managed to achieve recent growth then in what is a really competitive car leasing industry?
I think one of the biggest strengths we've got here, kind of overriding, is that we're small. So, you know, there's only 4 of us on the board, obviously 3 before I recently joined. So we can be nimble, and I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy most about working for that smaller business, because I used to liken making any changes at Taylor Wimpey to turning the Titanic. It had to go through subcommittee and this committee and that committee, and it just, by the time you got to changing it, actually the thing you wanted to change wasn't the problem anymore, and times had moved on, and sometimes that could be quite frustrating. Whereas here, if there's an idea or a problem or an issue or anything, it's whether there's all 4 of us in the room or whether it's just a problem for me, so I go and talk to one of them and then it's kind of done the next day or experimented with. And I think that's really key to growing, or even just staying the same size in a competitive market, because we can see an opportunity, take it, and if it doesn't work we can retract from it, and if it does work we can follow through with it even more. So we're able to just shift our strategy really quickly depending on what the market conditions allow, and that just means that we can offer different things to our customers that they're telling us that they want, that we might not have at the time. A week later we can have that in place, and it just makes all the difference, I think.
It's back to adaptability and flexibility, isn't it, and moving as quickly as you can to the market and what's happening out there. So I can absolutely understand how that is.
COVID's really cemented that, hasn't it? I think
absolutely.
You can
it's
change
keeping up with
quickly.
It now. Yeah, absolutely.
If you really need to, you can change quickly. Whereas I think before COVID, I think people had kind of got in this is how we do it, and this is why we do it, and it's going well, so there's no need to change. And then all of a sudden, there's a massive life shift, and people realise actually that there's a different way of that there is a different way of doing things.
Oh well, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Can you discuss any financial strategies that you've implemented then over these crucial years, really, that have contributed to the success of Autohorn over the last few years?
So I suppose going back to that nimble thing, when it was COVID, obviously we had a lot of people ringing up panicking that they'd been furloughed or were working from home, or, you know, their life had completely transformed as well. But I think one of the biggest things we did was actually we kept nearly everybody in cars. We had a massive, people panicking and wanting to return them kind of on the 25th of March or whatever it was. But actually we kept most people in cars by changing the amount they were. So as long as they were paying us more, the same or more as it was costing us to hold those cars on in the car park, they might as well have been out on rent. So we actually reduced what people were paying, mostly kind of down to 80% to mirror that furlough. So if you're being paid 80% of your wage, then you can afford 80% of everything else. Or bring back your BMW and go into a Peugeot, and you'll save yourself £300 a month. You know, so we really tried to work with our customers. So so the supply had completely dried up in the car market, and that wasn't just for the public, it was for everybody except for those companies that buy in massive volumes, because they were the ones that the manufacturers needed to keep happy, essentially, which meant that we shifted our model from buying all of our cars to leasing some. See, that makes it more expensive, but it meant that we had cars on fleet, and actually having cars on fleet with customers in them is the most important thing. So we had to do that. We changed how we finance and fund some of the cars. So actually we had cash in the bank. Normally what we do is fund cars anyway to keep that working capital within the business, and we actually delayed that, so saving on interest costs. as much as we could. And although it sounds bizarre when we're struggling for stock, we actually made the decision to sell the cars that we did own that were coming to the end of their normal life that we would have them for. So we turn our stock kind of every 6 to 9 months. So it was all coming up for sale in the kind of traditional model, and we actually decided, well, let's do it, because actually the price that we're getting for these cars is astronomical. And again, people listening will have felt that in the trying to even buy a second-hand car was madness. And so we kind of said, well, let's make hay while the sun shines, because you never know what's coming. And so we did, and we sold all of our cars at ridiculous prices for some of them. You know, you think you can't believe what people are paying for these cars, but actually it set us up on a really good foundation now for the next, you know, for the challenges that we're all facing at the minute.
Fantastic. And again, just another example of how moving quickly and being able to adapt that strategy, because you're a smaller team, has allowed those results over those years to make the most out of them. Can you describe some of the most significant financial challenges that the company has faced, and possibly any of the ways in which you've helped to overcome them?
So I don't think we can talk about financial challenges at the minute without talking about the cost of living crisis. We've had two challenges, I suppose, being pinched at both, resulting as being pinched at both ends. So as I mentioned before, we switched from buying our cars to leasing our cars. Now, when we did that, interest rates were still at their lowest that they'd ever been. And so that was considerably more expensive. Now, less so, because obviously our funders base our pricing on the Bank of England base rate plus a margin, and now that's gone up, obviously.
Okay.
Everything is more expensive. But certainly when we made that decision, it was a conscious decision to keep customers in cars, even though we knew it was going to be more expensive and pinch our bottom line. But I think the 2 years we'd had previously, an investment in systems, which I know we're going to come to, had meant that we can weather that and absorb some of it without having to pass it all on to our customers, who obviously are going through a cost of living crisis, where cars and especially new cars, because, you know, our cars are nice, shiny new, you know, they're delivered to you with kind of 10 miles on them, or, you know, however far away you live from our business, are a luxury. And actually buying an older car or leasing an older car from a different sort of leasing company could seem much more affordable. But like I say, we have, you know, we flex our pricing, we work with our customers. You know, they might want to go into a high-end car, but we say, well, actually, you know, can you really afford that? Because we do credit and affordability checks. So we've been pinched kind of at both ends from a customer supply side. And then also towards the end of 2022 into 2023, there's been a massive crash in the electric vehicle market. And so that's kind of taken the bottom out of that market. And we have electric vehicles on our fleet, which normally we would have sold. And again, I keep harping back to this kind of being nimble, making different decisions. But actually, well, we said, well, why are we going to sell these cars and make a loss on them? Let's just keep our customers in them, because actually business customers especially want electric vehicles because it's cheaper for P11D purposes, and aren't necessarily so bothered about having a newer car. But we can price it accordingly in that, yes, you're not in a brand new high pace anymore because you've had it for 2.5 years, but it's better to have it out earning us some money than having it sitting on the car park waiting to be sold for a loss. So
absolutely,
so that's really the EV market. I think is one that we're still, I'm not going to say struggling with, but I think that all leasing and car hire companies are trying to navigate through, because obviously the mandate is we've got to move towards electric vehicles. Manufacturers, yes, it's been pushed back, but manufacturers have geared up their facilities now to produce electric cars, and so some of the deals we're getting is, well, yes, we'll sell you these petrol diesel cars, but actually if you want those, you've got to take some electric cars as well.
Okay.
Which for us is then a problem at the end of their life in terms of getting rid of them. So we're having to take on more risk of doing that to get the deals, to get the cars on fleet. So I think that's one we're still trying to navigate. We've got a really good close link of dealers that we're working closely with to try and not prove a point to the manufacturers, but to get those deals right and to get the prices right, given that the market at the end is what we have to take the risk on.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's always good to hear those challenges for people to, associate with and understand that they've been in similar places, because, it's never straightforward, is it? In what ways, you mentioned about technology, in what ways have technology specifically impacted the financial operation of Autohorn? Are there any innovative tools or software that have been particularly beneficial for the business?
So I think go back to 2018 when things were fine and we didn't know the world was going to change. Actually, we just invested quite heavily and have continued to invest quite heavily in a completely bespoke system. So originally it was to replace our fleet management system, and so it's called Alfie. So it's the Autohorn Live Fleet Information System. I think I'd worked here about 18 months before anybody actually thought to tell me that that's what the acronym stood for originally. And so that was designed to manage all of our cars from whether they worked from an investment perspective to ordering them and like keeping track of them and then selling them at the end. But actually since then it has become kind of our all-encompassing system. So not only does it track every car from when we make the decision to buy it to when we sell it, it now deals with every customer opportunity. So all customer opportunities come into the system, the credit check's automatic, the documents are sent out of it automatically, sent back into it automatically. You can find the status of that customer anywhere within the process, within that system. So whether it's you find the car and then you can trace it back to the customer, or you find the customer and then you can trace it back to the car, all of their documents are held within the system. Every payment they make is tracked through the system. Right. All their traffic offences, if they, so happen to go drive down a bus lane, any damage, anything like that is all within Alfie. And that has completely transformed, I think, the number of people we rely on as well, I think, is one thing. But also from a finance director's perspective, just the consistency of the process and the controls that we're able to have now. Obviously, different people have got access to different parts of the system. Nobody can buy a car, rent it out to a customer, sell, get it back. Nobody can do that whole process, not even the board. And it is just, it's so easy. People come in, we get new team members or whatever, and they've never heard of it, and that can be quite daunting, especially I think in a finance team. You think, well, I've worked with Sage or I've worked with Xero or QuickBooks or whatever, and then they come in and they say, oh, what's your system? Oh, well, it's Alfie and it's bespoke, and you kind of see their face drop and they think, oh God, it's going to be another one to learn. But because we've driven the development, it's so intuitive, and it just, and I would say it makes perfect sense because I've been here now for so long, but it does seem to be picked up really easily. So and the customer journey, it's just easy. We press a button, it sends the documents, the customer fills them in on their phone, sends it back. It just has made all of that so much more efficient. Yeah.
Would you be able to ever quantify the savings on efficiencies, for example, implementing like a bespoke system like that? Is that something that you ever talk about? Because, I'm always talking to people in business and in finance about where can you automate your process. Obviously it's an investment initially, but ultimately it will be a saving moving forward, and it's what every business leader has probably got on their strategy for the next 12 months in terms of AI automation and how to make sure that you've explored it within your business without affecting customer service. But would you be able to quantify that? Is that something that you ever reflect on when you look back from the old system to the new one?
I think quantifying it in monetary terms would be difficult, except for saying in terms of staffing levels, I suppose. Before I joined, before COVID, I think there were 10 people in finance. I've got a team of 5 now.
Wow. Okay.
And we do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's about that scalability. So we've got a great team of people here now. Everybody does their job fantastically well. We get on. It's a great office atmosphere. And we're not as busy as we have been in the past. Certainly not, ironically, not as busy as we were through COVID, which every time I say that seems such a bizarre thing because it's the opposite to what a lot of businesses were feeling. But because of the systems, we can scale up very quickly. So we're not exposed to the same level of recruitment risk anymore, is what I would say. So we've got a really good basis, and we could probably grow by at least 25%, if not kind of 30 or 40%, without needing to recruit into most of the teams. Now, obviously, if we got 40% more customers, we'd need that in terms of salespeople. But in terms of my team and kind of the back office admin things that need to be done, we'd just be able to cope with that, because now we don't want to get any smaller, because then that would create that recruitment risk, which, as we all know, and you know, we talk about quite a lot in some of the networking things we go to, is the biggest problem at the minute.
Absolutely. Talent, finding the best talent.
Having those systems in place just means, you know, and even just things like holiday cover or sickness cover, or it's just easy because people can pick it up around their other job, because there's nothing that is so labour intensive that it can't be done by somebody else.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. And can you share a piece of advice for aspiring finance professionals who want to make, who are wanting to make that big impact in their organisation? Is there anything from your experience that you want to share?
So I did think about this question a little bit. I've got two bits, actually. And the first was a phrase that always stuck with me, that my dad actually said. He said, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that proportion. And so watch and listen, I think, especially when you're new into an office or a finance team, whether that be an audit team, whether that be, working within a business, is that you will get given jobs that are seemingly boring, and that are boring, photocopying, scanning, filing, but watch what other people are doing, listen to the conversations, read what you're given to scan and ask questions about it, because there's a reason you're being asked to do it. It's not just because somebody else can't be bothered, it's because you're there to help, and actually it's a good everything you're given is an opportunity to learn. So that is what I would say. And also, it's a great profession if you're nosy, because every road leads back to finance. So you get to know all arms of the business. When you start, when you're new and kind of on a management program or whatever it might be, ask to go and sit with different departments, because if you don't know what they do, you can't help them. And I think we're moving away rapidly from even when I started, that the finance team were kind of shoved in a corner and they were just there to count the money, and nobody asked advice or for help, but they just did what they did, and they did it quietly, and they didn't, and then they went home at the end of the day. And I think that opinion of finance has shifted massively now, and I think people are realising that we can add value, we've got good ideas, and we can help every department. So if you go and find out what they do, that will be your opportunity to really add value and make your name known amongst your colleagues and those that will have an influence on your career moving forward.
That's such great advice. Thank you, Sarah, and I'm sure lots of our listeners listening to that will really resonate with that advice as well. But I guess I just wanted to close with to understand really your future financial goals for Autohorn, and how you have a plan to achieve them.
Yes, so we've had a bit of a big change this year, actually. So we're in a 2024 period of learning and change for us, because kind of probably this time last year, middle of last year, Europcar, who we had the franchise for, decided to take back all of their franchises. We were actually the last one, so we'd been expecting it. Even it was mentioned to me during the interview process that we're the last one and we don't know how long it's going to last and everything. And that was obviously a massive part of our business in terms of daily rental. That's what we did it through. It was Europcar's marketing, customers, website, all of that was based on what they did, and we kind of bore the fruit of it. But that's now gone. We don't have that franchise anymore. But what we have done is create our own daily rental business. So we've taken the knowledge and experience that we had from Europcar and made it our own. And actually, it's going better than anybody could have ever expected. Still a challenge. We've got work to do. We're certainly not as big as we were with Europcar, but we're getting there, you know. And again, going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, being nimble and having those systems in place meant we could do it. So I think from the decision was made that we were going to take it in-house instead of partner with Avis or Hertz or try and get, you know, one of the other big daily rental companies on board, we'd designed, launched a website and designed the system and gone live within 5 weeks.
Wow.
So we decided just at the end of October, and we had our first booking in the first week of December. And it wasn't perfect, and, you know, as systems aren't, but it was one of those things, bite the bullet, do it. And because we're a small team, we're always talking to each other. There isn't anything that can't be overcome. If the agreement doesn't print off right, or if the payment doesn't, you know, anything can be addressed for that particular customer and then improved for the next one. So that's our biggest focus, I suppose, at the moment, is really growing that and recovering from that. And just building our fleet size again now. Cars are coming back to the market, manufacturers are coming back to the table. And so it's picking those right deals and then, finding the customers to go in them. But it is getting ever more competitive. So, trying all sorts of different arms at the minute. But we can, and we can retract back from them if it doesn't work and try something else.
Fantastic. Well, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you again for sharing your journey and all of those insights into Autohorn. I thought it was really insightful, and I'm sure lots of our listeners will definitely feel the same. Hopefully. So thanks, Sarah. Thank you for joining me. You're welcome. It's been great that you've joined me today on Beyond the Boardroom, a podcast inspiring business leaders across Yorkshire.
Thanks for having me.